Hello everyone, thank you for waiting patiently. I know we started a bit late, but we are here now. This is Arif Rahman coming live from London, United Kingdom. Today we have a special show, and the show is about freedom of speech in Bangladesh. And sorry, I just got distracted a little bit. Freedom of speech in Bangladesh and the current state of affairs with Shahidul Alam, who was arrested a few months back for speaking out against what's been going on in Bangladesh. We have today with us two very esteemed activist, professional, author, journalist. We'll introduce them to you in a minute. Just a few housekeeping statements first before we go. You are watching this on Arif Rahman's YouTube channel, and I would request you to subscribe to the channel so that you can receive future videos like this. You get notified. Also, if you can, please share this video with your colleagues and whoever you think should know the current state of affairs in Bangladesh. My name is Arif Rahman. If you don't know me, I'm a blogger. I've been blogging for the last almost 10-12 years now about secularism, freedom of speech, the problems of religion and religious political affiliation with the politics. And I got a lot of death threats because of what we have been saying, and I am listed in a multiple hit list per se from ISIS and a few other people. UK government had to kind of provide me some sort of security so that I don't get I don't end up with my dead body. We have today with us Salil Tripathi, who is an author, an esteemed activist, publisher. And also we have Tasneem Khalil, who's a journalist currently living in Sweden. He's also done extensive work about ISIS and some religious extremists in Bangladesh, and he was also subject to the similar type of brutality that Shahidul Alam is going through these days. Without further ado, let's introduce them. Hi guys, you are now live. We have Tasneem Khalil and Salil Tripathi on screen. Could you please say hello to our audience? Tasneem, I will start with you.
Hello, thank you, Arif, for having us here. I very much look forward to this discussion, and I just like to add that I have been working on the state of freedom of expression in Bangladesh also for some years now as a member of Swedish PEN's Writers in Prison Committee.
Thank you. And we have Salil Tripathi. And would you like to kind of introduce yourself a little bit for a quick second?
Yeah, sure. I was born in India. I live in London. I'm a writer. I chair the Writers in Prison Committee for PEN International. And I've been writing on freedom of expression issues for a long time. I wrote a book on Bangladesh, and which was a result of a lifelong passion and interest in the country.
Salil Tripathi has tremendous interest in Bangladesh, and we have seen some great articles and the book he just mentioned about Bangladesh and Bangladesh's freedom of speech, and also the freedom movement and liberation war. And I actually have a separate interview with Salil about the book, and I'll try to tag it after this show somewhere up in the screen on the corner so that you can actually go and watch that half-an-hour interview with Salil. I also have, forgot to mention, I also have numerous interviews with Tasneem Khalil about similar situations in Bangladesh, but those are in Bengali. So if you are from Bengali speaking background, then you will benefit from it. Otherwise, we don't have translations on those ones, I'm afraid, but we'll try to do something in English with Tasneem. That means that Salil also can speak Bengali. This is great.
I'm broken Bengali, but I can manage.
That was good. That was good.
That was brilliant, actually.
My Hindi is worse.
My Hindi is also very bad. I'm a Gujarati who speaks Bengali.
Oh, my Gujarati is non-existent, so I apologize.
We won't hold it against you.
Cool. So today's context is about the current state of affairs in Bangladesh in terms of freedom of speech. And particularly, Arif, I'm subject to this particular, I would say, steamroller from the government, because a few years ago, when Bangladesh was going through this upheaval called Shahbag movement, the eruption of Bangladeshi population, when we were kind of protesting against Bangladesh government's collusion with Islamists and also the war criminals of 1971. And at that time, Bangladesh government, along with the Islamists, came down really hard on us by vilifying us in front of the media and allowing the Islamists to actually drive us to kind of oblivion. And since then, a lot of our colleagues have actually died in the hands of Islamists. A lot of our colleagues are in jail, and there are numerous coverage of those incidents, and we'll try to actually shed light on those in our discussion today as well. So just to start the background of this discussion, we'll go to Tasneem Khalil to give us a bit of a background of what's been happening in Bangladesh. The reason I'm coming to Tasneem because he is from Bangladesh and he has seen these things from a bit more close detail. So Tasneem, could you give us a kind of a background of what's been going on for past few years? And I'll leave it to you to start on where do you want to start.
Well, Arif, thank you. I mean, I'd like to start back in 2007, actually. I mean, with my own story. In a way, this is coming to a circle. I was declared a prisoner of conscience by Amnesty International following my detention and torture by the DGFI, the Military Intelligence Agency, simply for the crime of journalism. I mean, I was criticizing the draconian practices they were engaged in at that time. And now, I mean, today we are speaking at a time when one of our colleagues, Shahidul, he has now been declared a prisoner of conscience by Amnesty International for the same crime. So, I mean, 10 years apart, more than 10 years, I mean, the situation has gotten much, much worse, I have to say that. I mean, right now, what I would like to mention is that back in 2007, I was arrested and then I was released very, very fast. I mean, they did not hold me more than 24 hours. That was primarily because of huge international outcry. That was primarily because of huge outcry, criticism inside the country. But what we see right now is that we have a government in Bangladesh that does not care at all about public opinion, that does not care at all about international opinion. Anyone who dares to criticize this government, anyone who dares to criticize the governing party or its student wing, they are forced into these kind of detentions under Section 57, and the government does not care. We have seen that people are protesting, people are criticizing, people are demanding justice, and now we have people in prison. I mean, we have Shahidul in prison, we have Maidul Islam, a university teacher in Chittagong, he is in prison. Some of the students were taken into prison. We have people who are picked up, who are abducted just for the crime of writing something on Facebook. And this is a terrible, terrible, horrible situation right now.
Okay, so just to give us a bit of a context, when we were talking about Shahidul Alam, I would like to play a little video of Shahidul Alam. It's a 4-minute long Al Jazeera interview that he gave to Al Jazeera, kind of expressing what's been going on in Bangladesh. Although a lot of people in Bangladesh, for example, the government elements might actually say that this this interview given by Shahidul Alam is misinformed and kind of tries to say things that are actually not correct, but that's a allegation from government side who's actually trying to cover their tracks. So I'm just going to play this, and I know Al Jazeera can claim copyright on this later, but I'll still play this for the benefit of other people who may not actually have seen this video. So I'll come back once this is over.
The roads. Well, joining us now via Skype from Dhaka is Shahidul Alam. He is a photographer and social activist. So as we've been saying, these protests were...
Actually, I thought I should give us a bit of a background on what was the context when Shahidul Alam was giving this interview. Just to give you a bit of a context, there was a insinuation in Bangladesh, and also it's actually reality, that the transport system and the people who manages the transport system were extremely corrupted, and the corruption resulted in people's lives, the passengers and road users' lives being endangered, because the drivers of the public transport, for example, buses and public buses, were being very reckless. And there was an incident where a bus driver piled up next to a school where people, parents and children were waiting to get on a bus, and instantly there were some death. That created a massive outrage throughout the country, and people's anger towards the mismanagement of transport system as government kind of erupted on it. Shahidul was following this very closely from his own webpage, and I'm showing some pictures of people's unrest and some sort of fight between the government elements. And then Al Jazeera obviously interviewed him, and during that interview Shahidul was explaining the context and also the background of it. So let's go back to the video and then we'll come back again.
Were sparked by two teens who were killed in a road accident. But is this all about road safety, or is there something larger going on here?
Very much larger. This has been going on for a very, very long time. It's an unelected government, so they do not really have a mandate to rule, but they've been clinging on by brute force. The looting of the banks, the gagging of the media. You mentioned just now that mobile internet is currently switched off. The extrajudicial killings, the disappearances, the need to give protection money at all levels, bribery at all levels, corruption in education. It's a never-ending list. It's been huge. So it really is that pent-up energy, emotion, anger that has been let loose. This particular incident, sad as it is really the valve that allowed things to go through. Very recently, there was another very big protest about the quota, because the quota system is rigged in such a way that only people close to the party in power get government jobs, and there is a disproportionate amount of jobs going to them. So ordinary people protested. That was very brutally brought down. Under pressure, the Prime Minister offered reforms, but then reneged on that. So this time, that's also part of the reason. So this time, when the students did go on protest, again, it went to a situation where they could not control it, and the Prime Minister has promised that she will cede to their demands. But of course, people no longer believe. She has no credibility. She's made promises before, it's not been accepted, so now they don't do it. But I think what we need to look at is what's happening in the street today. The police specifically asked for help from these armed goons to combat unarmed students demanding safe roads. I mean, how ridiculous is that? Today, I was in the street. There are people with machetes in their hands chasing unarmed students, and the police are standing by watching it happen. In some cases, they're actually helping it out. I mean, I've been under, this morning there was tear gassing, and I saw the police ganging up, trying to catch these unarmed students, whereas these armed goons who are going out wielding sticks and machetes are walking past, and they're just standing by.
So where do you think things are going to go from here? Because these protests appear to have spread across the country quite spontaneously and without any kind of central leadership here. This is part of the challenge that the government is dealing with. In that this is so grassroots in the way that it has spread.
Well, I think the government has miscalculated. It certainly felt that fear was enough, repression would have been enough, but I think you cannot tame an entire nation in this manner. And they, of course, are approaching elections. So the nearer it gets to elections, the more sensitive they are. They know if there is a fair and free election, they will lose. But they haven't got an exit plan because they've misruled for so long that if they do lose, they will be torn apart. So they have to hang on by any means, and that's exactly what they're doing. They are clinging on using the entire might of the system plus the armed goons at their disposal.
Good to speak with you. Shahidul Alam joining us there from Dhaka.
After that particular interview, something happened, and government suddenly started getting a lot of pressure, and something inside the government must have kind of got really angry, and Shahidul got arrested. And I'm showing some pictures of Shahidul getting arrested forcefully, and later on he was remanded, and there is talk of him being tortured, and he tried to say that I have been tortured. I'm just going to play you a video now, quick small video where it will show that he was being tortured. There you can see he was being kind of hoisted up into a police van, and in Bengali he was saying that he asked for a lawyer. I think this is a basic thing that Bangladesh government should give somebody who's under detention, but he was not allowed. He was trying to voice, but he was not given the opportunity to talk. So I'm coming back to you all now, and given what we just saw and what we have witnessed, what's your impression? I'll start with Salil.
Yeah, so essentially what seems to have happened is that somebody in the government panicked because of what he was saying. Students were on the streets, students were stopping cars, whoever they were, and demanding to see if their papers were in order, because clearly there were unlicensed drivers who were driving, and that led to the high rate of deaths in Bangladesh. In fact, the statistics are pretty grim of the number of people who die on Bangladeshi roads. And in that context, not only does Shahidul come on television and say that this is bad, he's witnessing it, he sees the violence being done to people who are photographing these incidents, but then he gets interviewed by Al Jazeera, where he puts it in context. He provides the overall political context of disappearances, of the so-called war on drugs, in which at least 100 people have died, and dozens of people have disappeared, taken away by intelligence and security agencies, and people don't hear about them for days, weeks, and sometimes months. And he says what may have seemed very controversial to the government, where he calls the government unelected or unaccountable. I don't remember the exact word. And his logic for that is rather simple. His logic is that the elections that took place the last time, at least 155 or 156 of the 300 MPs of Awami League were elected unopposed. I may be wrong on my statistics, but that's my memory. And it's only the other 144 who stood for elections, and out of them about 70 or 81, so there's 230 odd seats out of 300, but a large majority of them have clearly won because there was no opposition, and that's because the BNP didn't take part and Jamaat could not take part. So it's in that context that he makes a kind of an argument and expresses an opinion in calling the government unrepresentative or unelected. And you could argue whether that's fair statement or not, but it's certainly not something that can be deemed as inciting violence or hatred. But that's how it was read, and that's why he was arrested. And he was treated badly and beaten, as he said. And he said that his pajama, the kurta that he was wearing, the Punjabi, had blood on it. It was washed and it was made to wear it again. Denied access to lawyer. Now these are the basics that you don't expect in a democracy, and certainly not in a ruling party, which itself has been victim in the past of human rights abuses, and which argues quite justifiably that it led to the freedom struggle. I mean, it played a very big role in the freedom struggle. So for it to go back on those values, it's something that people will comment if they care about Bangladesh.
I'm going to quickly go back to Tasneem and ask for a comment about the two incidents that, two context actually elements that Salil just described. One was actually Shahidul himself actually was describing about this quota protest, and also there was something else also going on at the same time about war on drugs. Can you give us a bit of an idea of a bit of an elaboration of what those are?
So the Quota movement, it was a movement by university students primarily, who were demanding a reform to the existing system of recruitment into government jobs. And it was absolutely discriminatory. I mean, it discriminated in so many levels. It was very unjust, and the students were saying that we need a change to the system. And they were described by the government as some sort of conspirators who are, engaged in some very dirty, dark conspiracy to topple the government. And this is very, very common. Whoever puts forward some very justified demand, I mean, are seen as, troublemakers, are seen as conspirators who are going to topple the government some way or other. Then there was also, at that time, I mean, we have seen, I mean, it's still going on, but it has died down a little bit, extrajudicial executions of suspected drug traders. So the government is actually engaged in a Philippines-style drug war. I mean, they call it a drug war. They actually have made videos and very bizarre, like music videos also, like Cholo Jai Juthe, Madoker Biruthe, very trendy slogans and stuff. What they are doing is killing people in cold blood, and I have actually investigated one of these cases, the killing of a Army League politician in Technaf. And we saw that, I mean, it was a cold-blooded murder. The gentleman was shot dead, point blank, and that is something people in Bangladesh are not supposed to talk about. So here again we have a problem. I mean, people in Bangladesh cannot discuss their problems. People in Bangladesh cannot, discuss the persecution of quota activists. No newspaper are really ready to challenge the government on that. And here is another example. I mean, my investigation into the extrajudicial execution of Ikramul Haq could not be printed by any newspaper in Bangladesh. So I had to go to India and pitch this story to the OIR, which, as it happens, is banned. I mean, you cannot access the OIR from Bangladesh. And now they are talking about, putting more restrictions in internet usage, social media usage. So this is sort of the context. This is sort of the background.
Thank you for that. I've just been told that there may be a echo somewhere going on in the technical area. So I'm just going to take a quick pause here and try to sort this technical issue I have. And you have to excuse me, it's a one-man army I've got here. and trying to make sense of it. So people are saying, please fix the echo issue. Terrible echo is happening. Could you happen? It's not possible at all to listen. Right. So I'm going to try to see, kind of listen to myself. Yeah, I know what you mean. So allegedly, when there is one of the screens is echoing. I'll try to fix this quickly. Hopefully we should be okay for now. I'm gonna go for a quick test. So can you?
Someone said now okay. Someone said
yeah,
that's okay.
Message saying it's better now.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Sorry about that mishap earlier. Okay, I'll try to actually stay in these screens. Obviously, it's slightly better now. So sorry, carry on, Tasneem.
So no, I mean your question was that what was whatever Shahidul Alam was saying in that interview, 90% of that was simple facts, and then he added 10% of his own commentary. I mean, it's a very short interview. Anyone can go and check the facts. Anyone can go and fact check Shahidul Alam, and they will find that whatever Shahidul Alam was saying in that interview, that is backed up by solid information from journalists, from human rights organizations, from even Awami League's own statements. I mean, we can show that. So he did not say, he was not misleading in any way. And then the 10% of the commentary that he added, one of that was that this is an unelected government, which is absolutely right. I mean, Salil mentioned, I think it was 153 or 54 seats that went uncontested. But I mean, I have, in the past few months, I have actually asked people, people from Bangladesh that, did you yourself, could you vote in 2014? Could you yourself go to the polling booth and cast your own vote? I have not heard back from one person who said, yeah, I could cast my vote. So it was a sham of an election, and Shahidul Alam, what he said was absolutely on the money. I mean, he did not in any way misstate, or he did not in any way mislead anyone. And then I'd also like to add, since we are talking about his case here, anyone can go to his Facebook profile and see that, the allegation against him is that he somehow incited violence. He somehow incited the students to come out on the streets and engage in violence against police, against Awami League members. That is ridiculous, because we will see in Shahidul Alam's verified Facebook profile that he actually started broadcasting, that day late in the afternoon,
right?
Not in the morning. So whatever rioting that went on in Dhanmondi that day, he could not have influenced them by doing Facebook lives. So his crime was actually, he was, capturing visual evidence of abuses by the student wing of the government, the government party.
I would like to actually show Shahidul Alam's own Facebook lives, which is still available on his page. And if you allow me, I'll just gonna quickly jump there.
Hello, this is just a short update from home. I've returned from Jigatula and downloaded some of the pictures. Not much else to report, except that I discovered that 67 students with injuries, some with serious injuries, were admitted to the Japan Friendship Hospital. Earlier, I was also told that This last information came from medical staff and sounds fairly reliable. The earlier information I received was from a witness, an eyewitness, who on road number 2, who mentioned that about 10 students with injuries had been taken to the popular medical lab on road number 2. He did mention that they had numerous types of injuries, some with welts because of beating, but one student apparently had severe injuries and will probably have lost an eye. That was an eyewitness from road number 2. The 63 injured in Japan Friendship Hospital is something that a doctor who did not want to be named has specifically mentioned. The Army League was in full force around there, heavily guarded by police. I saw flag-bearing cars coming in and out of the place. One Apachala student has been taken to the police station, the Thana there, but they did eventually allow his father in. I'm not sure what the latest situation is. I'm just going to turn the camera around to show you my monitor screen, which will show an image of that's my monitor. And whoops, let me just do this so it's brighter. Just switched off. So these are some of the images on my monitor. They're raw files, so it takes a little bit of time to upload, but I'll take you to the last one of this series. Oh, I'm showing the same picture, apologies. Let me move this, let me select all, open that, then you'll be able to see the pictures in a sequence. Are we still stuck? We seem to be. Apologies for this. It's meant to move from one to the other. Doesn't seem to have done so. Let's see if it works now. No? Okay. I'm going to close that and take you to the picture I did want to show specifically. That's this one. And that is the armored vehicle, which is parked outside. It's very interesting in the sense that this is exactly where we were on the night when the rebellion at what was then the BDI camp took place. It was at night, and there were heavy artillery pointed towards the BDI gates at that time, but they did not have permission or authorization to attack, so they later retreated to the side streets, but were there all night. That was the beginning of the Army League period. We have no idea of knowing whether this is the end of the Army League period, but certainly this is the Army League clinging on to power despite popular opinion. This is Shahidul reporting on the 4th of August 2018.
So you can always see that this particular live, I don't know, Salil, if you have you seen this particular live before yourself that Shahidul did on the 4th of August? I think this was the last live that he did, and it's interesting because he showed a few pictures that he's taken himself, and it shows kind of Bangladesh government's armed forces, various types of armed forces, and their equipment parked around, and it kind of goes against what the government was trying to create as a narrative of what's been happening. It looks like the reason Shahidul was taken into jail and custody and government came down so heavily down on him is because he was trying to kind of expose what was going on under the guise of government's smokescreen. So before we actually elaborate on this, I don't think we've established who Shahidul Alam is. I mean, Salil, do you want to kind of give us a bit of a background on what you know of Shahidul Alam and why he's such a prominent figure in Bangladesh and also in international arena? Because I think you guys and along with few other well-known faces have protested outside the Bangladesh embassy in the United Kingdom. Who is Shahidul Alam and why he matters?
So Shahidul Alam matters for, I think, 2 or 3 reasons. I mean, if you look at contemporary international photography, some of the greatest names are Steve McCurry, then you have Sebastian Salgado, and you have Raghu Rai in India, just to name 3. There are many, many more. Dayanita Singh also in India. You should look at what they have to say about him, and they have all spoken out for him. 2 of the finest or 3 of the finest intellectuals in today are Noam Chomsky and Arundhati Roy. Then you have people such as Sharon Stone, the Hollywood actress, and also Eve Ensler, who wrote Vagina Monologues, the feminist play. All of them have also spoken out for him. The reason they react to him so warmly is that Shahidul believes that the stories of the global South should be said by people from the global South. I mean, it's fine for people from the global North to come with their expensive gadgetry and cameras and start taking pictures and telling our stories. He's not against that. He's not saying that there's anything oriental about that, gaze or anything like that. What he wants to do is to make sure that we should be telling our stories and we should be taking our picture. And so he wants people, children, women, to get hands to camera and start taking photographs. And he has trained hundreds of people through his Pathshala project, which is one of the largest photographic schools in the world. He does the Chobi Mela, which is one of the largest photo exhibitions in the world, and which honors and respects. And if you look at his trajectory, he trained to be a scientist, and then he decided to become a photographer. And then he comes back to Bangladesh in the mid-80s at a time when actually Hasina Wajid and Khalida Zia are together fighting the dictatorship of General Ershad. And at that time, he starts documenting all of that. He starts taking photographs. He covers the fall of Ershad. He covers the treatment of Hindus. He covers the treatment of the Chakmas. When Kalpana Chakma goes missing, he creates his exhibition called Kalpana's Warriors, where he honors the human rights activists who have been fighting to get an answer about what happened to her and makes Bangladesh refamiliarize itself with its own history of Kaptai Dam and what was happening there. He then goes to the camps in Katupalong and places like that and takes photography about the Rohingya. He does photography of other human rights abuses. Children who are working in brick factories, goes to Chittagong and takes photographs near Cox's Bazar of all these people who are working in shipbreaking industries. So the Bangladeshi narrative, he is a witness. His book is called My Journey as a Witness. And he wants to be a witness. He wants to tell those stories. He wants to familiarize and make, and it's not just a Bangladeshi at home. He goes abroad too. He has taken photographs of Bangladeshi migrant workers in Maldives, for example. He has taken photographs of children in Palestine and other conflicts where people have been hurt. So he has what I was talking about this morning to a bunch of experts and academics who are looking at visibilities and invisibilities and what photography does. And the phrase I said that he has a continuous compassionate gaze towards the world. And that's very clear. So I think that's the reason why he matters so much to the world. And we must not forget it was the same government that we are talking about and the same Prime Minister who gave one of the Shilpakala Awards, one of the highest awards of Bangladesh, only 2.5 years ago in 2015. So it's this government which has recognized him, and it is this government which has celebrated him, and which has now, because of the politics leading up to the election, chosen to act the way it has done.
Can I just add to that? I mean,
sure.
Yeah. I mean, what Salil was saying, I mean, it's a very good description of who Shahidul Alam is. But I mean, I was recently talking to a government official back in Dhaka, and I'm not going to name him for obvious reasons. But he says the fact that Shahidul Alam is so famous, the fact that Shahidul Alam is so well known outside the country, is actually in a way working against him, because this is a government that goes after famous people, I mean, as sort of a hobby. So you'd see, I mean, we have seen the humiliation that Dr. Muhammad Yunus was subjected to. And obviously, I'm not a fan of Dr. Muhammad Yunus, but I definitely, did not like how he was treated. We have seen how Shahidul Alam, because, I mean, there is this tendency right now in some quarters inside the regime that if you are well known outside the country, we will show you your real place inside Bangladesh, because we do not care about what the world says. So this is sort of a very, what shall I say? It's a very disturbing trend. And we have, it's not only about Shahidul Alam. The latest victim of these smears by government officials, by ministers, I mean, we can talk about Dr. Kamal Haasan. I mean, internationally well known. I mean, he is one of the leading jurists in South Asia, and he was a special reporter, this and that. But if you see the way even Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister, talks about him these days, you'll see, like how this tendency to show people their real place is taking shape. We can also talk about Zafrullah Chaudhry. I mean, extremely well known. I mean, he is one of the heroes of public health activism, not only in Bangladesh, but in the world. And we can see that, I mean, just yesterday, a group of Awami League thugs actually went into Ganashastha Kendro in Savar, and they tortured female students. They broke one student's arm. I mean, he actually lost his leg a few years back because of Rapid Action Battalion. So this is something we also have to remember, because when I was talking to this official, he said, you have to remember, I mean, if people, I mean, relatively unknown people have sort of that protection, that, well, I mean, at least they will say sorry and they will be released. But if you are someone well known, if you are someone very famous, if you are someone who has say famous photographers and Nobel laureates and film stars talking for you, asking for your freedom, then I mean, there is a chance that you are in big trouble.
Salil, you can weigh in anytime if you want to. I mean,
I just want to add two personal parts. That when I was researching my book in Bangladesh, which was between 2011 and 13, made several trips there. I learned so much about the visual history of the conflict, because it was a very well photographed war in the 1970s. I mean, in 1971, and you had some of the finest photographers, including Mark Thibault and Raghu Rai and Kishore Parekh, who were and beside Rashid Talukdar and other Bangladeshi photographers who were taking photographs at that time. And what I did was I went to his photo lab, Drick, and looked at the archives. And he patiently sat through with me for 2 days, telling me stories about several of the photos, and made the story vivid for me. A year earlier, he published this book called The Birth Pangs of a Nation. And when he published that book, he did me the honor and granted me the privilege of writing an essay along with it, in which I wrote about the refugee crisis. This is when I had not even written my book. I mean, he was taking a gamble, and he did that. And he told me about so many places I must visit in order to get a more comprehensive story. And if the book is rich and well liked and respected, he plays no small role in that, in introducing me to Bangladesh.
Beautiful. I actually personally knew him before these things happened as the main person behind Drick Gallery, which kind of collects and preserves photos, especially historical photos of Bangladesh. And a friend of mine was trying to do a show in London of Muktijuddha 1971 Liberation War, and Shahidul, being a big person, he actually started communicating with him personally, showing the interest. unfortunately, my friend had to kind of abandon the project. But from my personal interest was that, that I took away from this whole thing is that Shahidul Alam has a personal interest about the well-being of Bangladesh, and that's why I think he kind of jeopardized his own safety, knowing that this might happen to him, seeing the kind of track record of how this government was coming down really hard on all the dissidents. This is really heartbreaking. And as you said, Tasneem, earlier about what's been going on in Bangladesh is that elements inside Bangladesh, no matter how vile they are, they can do whatever they want to do to opposition. Like Dr. Zafrullah, this is so funny. Although he kind of spoke out against the military head of military because of the bad things he may have done, but then Dr. Zafrullah was asked to apologize in public by creating pressure on him, and that was not enough. He was then given some sort of case against him, file case, and the case is so stupid and so ridiculous. The whole idea looks like to ridicule in front of every people. It's like if you have done something good for Bangladesh, you are bound to be ridiculed by elements in the government and sometimes the government themselves. So this is and this is symptomatic, as both of you have kind of expressed, is that like us lot, although we may not have done any good to the Bangladesh, but we tried to stood up. When we say we, as in the so-called atheist gangs who kind of spoke really strongly against religious political affiliation in Bangladesh, and then we were shunned for this, and for months in Bangladeshi newspapers, my personal name and few of our colleagues were constantly vilified, and our lives were put in danger, and it happened under government initiative, but today's discussion is not about that, but I think it's related to that, and I thought it should mention. And it's also symptomatic because if I can relate, in 1971, the people who fought for Bangladesh, the Mukti Joddhas, later on, even today, they are ridiculed in every way. Although the government shows some action by giving them some stipend and giving them some, but generally we hear stories of Bangladeshi liberation warriors. In other countries, they would be constantly respected. Even in the UK, for example, people who have fought in the world wars and any other wars for Britain are constantly kind of venerated and then cherished, and they're presented, and government takes care of them. Whereas Bangladesh, the 1971 warriors, the Mukti Joddhas, are left to die on their own, left to earn their living in such a bad way. Whereas the other side, the side that actually lost during 1971, the Jamaati side, the Islamist side, the Pakistan favoring side, are actually kind of in bed with Bangladeshi government these days, are showing tremendous amount of power inside Bangladesh. So this kind of shows the bad state of Bangladesh. Do you guys have any comments on what I was just trying to allude to?
I mean, I'd like to add here that, I mean, you have sort of given us the background a little bit there. In today's Bangladesh, I mean, since we are talking about freedom of expression and freedom of speech, in today's Bangladesh, we are not, I mean, people are not allowed to say anything against three groups. And I say, I mean, these are Allah, Army, and Awami League. I mean, these are the untouchables in today's Bangladesh. So we have, I mean, we must. Awami League is always talking about BNP and its alliance with the Jamaat, which is a very legitimate criticism. But Army League is never talking about its alliance with the mullahs, with the people who came out on the streets of Dhaka in 2013 with the demand that atheists need to be subjected to capital punishment. And that was, I mean, Ahmed Shafi, the leader of Hafazat, openly he was inciting, again, I mean, Shahidul Alam has been put in prison for incitement. Ahmed Shafi was saying that atheists should be murdered, and that is a wajib as in, like one of the religious duties. This person did not face any kind of sanction of law. Instead, he has been, I mean, even recently, he has been bankrolled by the government, by Sheikh Hasina's government, and they have also included a section in the latest Digital Security Act, which is a version of blasphemy law. I mean, all these mullahs have been calling for, demanding for all these days. So that is one. I mean, you cannot criticize Islam, even if that criticism is legitimate. I do recognize that there is a problem of anti-Muslim bigotry among some atheists, and that needs to be challenged at the intellectual level, not by sending people to prison. The next thing is army. You cannot say anything about the army. I mean, you cannot say that, I mean, recently a field commander of DGFI, he was directly implicated. I mean, my investigation found that he was involved in extrajudicial execution. You cannot say that. You cannot print that information in any newspaper. Look at Zafrullah Chaudhry. All he did was say something which was a little bit misleading about the army chief. But here we must also remember that in a democracy or in a relatively free society, even allowing misleading information in the media is very important, because what Zafrullah Chaudhry said was not right. I mean, he misstated some details of the case, but later we journalists could actually make queries and figure out that, hang on, I mean, the current army chief, when he was the commander of an artillery regiment, there was a case that, you know, lots of ammunitions went missing, and there was a court of inquiry. So Zafrullah Chaudhry was wrong in terms of, you know, like the place and actual title General Aziz was holding at that time, but he was actually, you know, pretty much describing something which was closer to truth. But yeah, I mean, these discussions you are not supposed to have on television, and then you cannot criticize Army League. You cannot criticize, you know, Sheikh Hasina, for example. Maidul Islam, the teacher in Chittagong, he is right now in prison for committing 2 crimes. And crime number 1 is that he posted something on Facebook, said, Hashi na. I don't laugh. Hashi na. 2 different words. That has been taken as an insult to Hasina, the Prime Minister. That is number 1. And number 2 is that he posted the picture of a bowl of watery lentil, dal. And that's why he is right now in prison under Section 57, because that somehow has insulted Sheikh Hasina, you know, I'm not sure how. So these are the untouchables. These are the three.
I want to add a comment here, because I think a lot of people say things that could potentially insult government or the image of the Prime Minister, but it looks like the context that has been created inside Bangladesh is of some sort of a blasphemy law. That means if somebody wants to, and there is abuse of this law. If someone tries to take somebody down and there is personal, vendetta going on, all you need is to find some sort of evidence that you have said something against the images, as you said, of Allah, Muhammad, or Sheikh Hasina, or some of one of the big political leaders. That's all you need, because then the whole political establishment will come down very hard on you. And that seems to have a common, consistent treatment among all the cases that we have just been discussing for the past hour or so. And that, what sort of society that actually created by that? And have you seen this sort of societies in other places of the world? And what is the result of this sort of society turning into a non-democratic and non-freedom of speech favoring society? This question is actually for Salil. If you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of equating a leader with the state, and then to make the argument that any criticism of the leader is the criticism of the state, is a classic trope of any government that is becoming more and more authoritarian. And Bangladesh is not unique in this. I mean, in Turkey you have Erdogan. In Philippines, to which Tasneem referred to earlier today, Rodrigo Duterte is part of the same delusion or the same kind of an attitude. You look at Russia, try saying something against Putin and people will say you're attacking the Russian state. In India, try saying something against Narendra Modi and you'll have all kinds of people saying you're being anti-national. You have similar tendencies from people who react to you very, very, very strongly. If you speak against Viktor Orban in Hungary, let's call a spade, Donald Trump in America. So you have country after country where if people are taking on a powerful elected leader, the response to that has been extremely harsh, and that the equation of the state with the leader it's a perilous line. When I grew up in India during the emergency in 1975, and there was someone who was the leader of the Congress party at that time called Devkan Barua, who was an Assamese leader. And he came up with a slogan which was Indira is India, India is Indira. And this was said, I think, sometime in 1976. Within 7 or 8 months, there were elections in India and she lost. Now, of course, she comes back to power and that's a separate story. But my point is that this equation of the leader with the state, and therefore any criticism of the leader or of the present government with that, as seeing it as a seditious act or as an act which undermines the integrity of the state is wrong, because this kind of says that the kind of nationalism, which always insists that my country right or wrong is the right way to go about it. No, your country can be wrong, or your country's leadership can be wrong. Nobody's right all the time. And a society becomes richer and better and more democratic and is able to come up with more effective solutions to the problems it faces if it listens to all views, even if they are from another perspective and even if they are wrong.
Tasneem, would you like to add something to this?
No, but yes, I agree with Salil. I mean, what I fear most is that, I mean, right now under Sheikh Hasina's leadership of the regime, we are seeing something which is very disturbing, and I'm very, very fearful of the future. And that is, Bangladesh is turning into a police state very fast, where we have a law enforcement agencies, security agencies like the Reputation Battalion, like the DGFI, who are deployed as the executioners of the governing party. That is number one. That is, I mean, one component of the police state. Then we are seeing very serious and severe crackdown on freedom of expression. I mean, it started with Section 57, which, by the way, I mean, used for the first time against these so-called atheist bloggers. And now we are seeing, like anyone and everyone can be a victim to that. I mean, a few days back, some women were detained from the streets of Dhaka by Chhatra League members and handed over to the police, and they were booked under Section 57 because they found some photos of those women feeding the student protesters. I don't know how that falls under Section 57. And now they have the Digital Security Act, and we came to know a few days back that Rapid Action Battalion, which we, human rights activists and journalists, we have been describing as a death squad, that agency is now going to be in charge of online surveillance and censorship. So, yeah, I mean, Turkey is an example that immediately jumps to mind, that this is what is happening. This is what is happening to Bangladesh, and we need to sit up and take notice and start speaking up against it.
Sometimes I feel like that Bangladesh and Turkey are being managed by the same blueprint. I don't know if you feel the same, but it looks like there is some blueprint that and strategy and also, you know, plans that are kind of cyclo-styled, photocopied, and then sent in by mail to both countries, and then they execute and kind of implement the same problems and strategies on both countries. Both of countries have kind of come down really hard on journalists, and it kind of have a turnaround from secularism to a more authoritarian Islamist type of state, which is it doesn't show a very good future for Bangladesh, unfortunately. Now, I know all of us kind of been coming down really hard on Bangladesh government for past few weeks, and we don't have any representation of any Bangladeshi government people in this particular talk right now. So I'll try to be a bit of a devil's advocate in this case, and try to say a few things that they might want to say. For example, they might want to say, I've been actually talking to a very high up person in Bangladesh government who was visiting here, and I got the opportunity to spend some time with that person, and he was giving me all the usual Awami propaganda lines, and one of them was like, RAB is not coming down hard on everybody, it's only targeting the BNP and Jamaat, who's kind of well known for their negative activism in Bangladesh, like the brutal murders and what happened during 2013, the destruction of properties in May in Bangladesh by the madrasa students, and Bangladesh government is trying to do cleanup, and because of the cleanup there could be some collateral. Do you think that actually is something that we can, take as an argument? I will actually ask both of you, whoever wants to go first.
Tasneem, I think you should, because you follow Bangladesh much more closely than I do.
Okay. Well, I mean, this is, I mean, they definitely have their lines, but I'll actually say Awami League took the playbook from BNP and using Rapid Action Battalion against BNP now. I mean, what has changed is that now the rate or the numbers of extrajudicial executions, that is higher, and we also have something that did not happen under BNP, and that is the campaign of enforced disappearances. Recently, I interviewed the former Chief Justice of Bangladesh, Surendra Kumar Sinha, and he told me on the record that it is DGFI which is responsible for all the cases of enforced disappearances in the country. So obviously, I mean, I'll go back a little bit here. I mean, when Sheikh Hasina was the opposition leader, she was the fiercest critic of Rapid Action Battalion. And She even says she is going to disband this, and they, in their election manifesto in 2008, they actually promised that they will end the campaign of extrajudicial executions, which, I mean, none of the promises they kept. So I really don't know. I mean, what kind of apology is this from their side? And also, we must remember something. I mean, we call human rights for a reason. I mean, these are rights of human beings. These are rights of citizens of any country. I mean, your human rights do not cease to exist if you are a member of the BNP, or if you are a member of the Jamaat, or if you are a member of the Awami League. I mean, the state is supposed to protect your right to life. Instead, what they are engaging is that they're abducting people, mostly BNP activists, BNP leaders. They are torturing them to death. And that is something, I don't know how exactly that is helping Bangladesh. You know, campaigns of murder is not in any way helpful to any society.
I'll come to Salil for a quick second as well to make a comment, and then I have another apology to bring up.
Okay.
No, I mean, agree with a lot of the thrust of what Tasneem was saying, in the sense that, you know, you really have to ask yourself extremely seriously the kind of people that you have been talking about, you know, whether it is the teacher in Chittagong who puts the post up saying Hashina, or whether it is someone like Kamal Haasan or Zafarullah and Shahidul, and put the hand on your heart and say that are they really BNP and Jamaat members? I think the government needs to ask itself that question honestly. Look at Bangladesh's own history, look at their own contribution, and then figure out. If they really think that way, then I think that we have a different kind of conversation at all. But that's one thing. And the other thing, I completely agree with what Tasneem said here, that, you know, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're a Bangladeshi citizen, you have those rights, and the state has an obligation to protect those rights. That it cannot be the excuse to say that, oh, but they are opposition members, so they can be beaten up or tortured or abducted or killed. That's not how democracies are meant to function. And that's also not the kind of Bangladesh that Bangabandhu wanted to build, right, in 1971. This is not what he was fighting for. And this is not what Mukti Bahini fought for.
Thank you for that. The other apology was more like, you know, it actually, I think it's not, we've kind of covered this already, so I'll try to shorten this whole discussion now. We've been talking for almost an hour now, and I do appreciate both of you joining us. And I didn't see many comments and questions, by the way. Yeah, most of the questions are actually, I can see that because this is a live show, and I wanted to see if there's any comments that are relevant that I would like to. Oh, actually, there is one quick question that could be relevant, and this could be a question for all of us. Is like, somebody was saying, is it the high time to throw out Blasphemy Act like Section 295A in India to establish real freedom of speech? I think this question, I can give a context if anyone hasn't seen. Section 295A was a colonial era law that was introduced by the British colonial government back in when they were in charge of the whole Indian subcontinent. After the liberation, Indian subcontinent, India, and then then Pakistan, which is Western East Pakistan, kind of inherited them. After the 1971 War of Liberation, Pakistan went on to weaponizing that Section 291A by introducing, I think, 295B, C, D, etc., by making harder and harder to people to blaspheme. And Bangladesh kind of kept it there, and then recently introduced kind of redone version of it, which encompasses digital and online and offline. But in India, I think they was rolling back, and I don't know, Salil, if you can correct me, do India actually still have that section 295?
It still has it, yes.
What's the plan and what's the activism that is going on in there? Do you know?
There is any move to remove it? I think if you go back to the books that deal with religion are often face the fury, and it's not just 295A in India. India also has another law called 153A. Now 295A is basically about maintaining communal harmony and so on. But 153A actually allows anybody to go to the court and say that this book is offending my sensibility on religious grounds, and that gives the police enough of an authority to proceed in the matter. And these are the kind of sections invoked to go after books that offend people. And there have been several cases in recent years, at least 2 cases, not directly under 295 and 153A, but on the hurt sentiment phenomenon. One involving a Tamil writer called Perumal Murugan, and one involving a writer in English, but who writes on the Santal, called Hansta Soindra Shekhar. And their books were temporarily suspended, and it's a controversial story. I don't want to get dragged too much into that issue. But the fact is that, yes, those laws do exist. And you're right in tracing it back to the British colonial experience. Just as the sedition law, 124A, I don't know what the law is in Bangladesh, but in India it is 124. Those are the kind of laws that still exist, and they are there created by colonial power to look after its subjects and not citizens. And we moved from being subjects to being citizens in 1947 in the case of India and Pakistan, and in 1971 in the case of Bangladesh. And therefore, there has to be a newer and more mature way of looking at that relationship. And that has been lacking because, as you were saying, that in the earlier Awami context, that it's the law that's the problem. Tomorrow, if BNP comes to power, or, if some Jatiyo party again comes to power, somebody else comes to, they will want to use the same laws against their opponents. So the concerted movement across the party line in all the countries in the subcontinent has to be to change those laws. Because changing the government is not going to change anything. I'm afraid don't expect Khalida Zia and her supporters to overturn these laws, because once they are in power, they will want to use it. If Arshad ever comes back to power, he will want to use it. If somebody else comes to power, he or she will also want to use the same thing.
I'm gonna throw a wrench into works now, by the way. Only I think yesterday I saw this strange news article, and I wasn't sure if it's correct or not. I mean, if you guys are aware of this, in Austria,
yes,
there's been a recent overturn, or actually upheld, of a strange ruling where one secular writer was punished and kind of penalized for...
She was not secular, she was right-wing.
Was she right-wing? Okay, I wasn't sure about that. Okay, so she was...
Fine, but she has the right. She still has the right, but she... Yeah.
And she kind of, in a way, she said that the life of Muhammad seemed like he did something that is pedophiliac. And the government, sorry, the law, the courts kind of say this is not freedom of speech, and this is I can't remember the exact term they used, but she was penalized for saying that. Now, where does that leave us in terms of I don't know how would anyone want to Tasneem, have you heard this particular?
Well, I mean, Salil, do you want to take it before me, or?
Yeah, I'll take it before. I've read the judgment very quickly yesterday, and I think there are 2 parts to the judgment which I haven't fully understood, and I need to read it again before I write about it. So whatever I say is slightly tentative. But I think the court makes 2 distinctions between the issue of pure freedom of speech, and the other is the part of causing offense on religious grounds. And I think the court judgment does say that this is not necessarily incitement of hatred, but the Austrian law, which prevents you from criticizing a religion, because the Austrian law is quite open about it. You can't criticize a church or any other place of worship, is what the law says. And they said that legal stricture is in line with European law and with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and so on. So to that extent, the fine that the Austrians imposed on her was justified. Now, that may be a very good narrow reading of the law, but the problem I see with this is that this will be spun and read by people that saying that the European court says blasphemy is wrong and that committing blasphemy should be protected against, and therefore there should be laws to prevent people from committing blasphemy. Now, if you go down that path, that makes it harder for a future book like the Satanic Verses to be published, for example. And it also emboldens countries like Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, which have in the past gone to the UN Human Rights Council to argue essentially that blasphemy is very bad, and therefore people should not be offending religious sentiment. Now this is a very slippery slope if you go down that path. There are people, well-meaning people, who say that, look, what about Islamophobia? And of course it's a big problem in Austria, in Hungary, in many parts of Europe today, that Syrian refugees, Iraqi refugees, and other people who are Muslim who want to choose to wear the veil, which they have a right to, are being targeted, are being attacked, and so on. But the distinction I like to make, and I mean this is only my view, and I'm not saying that it's the only view at all, is this, that you have to distinguish between hate speech and dangerous speech. Hate speech is speech where you say that people of one religion are stupid or they are bad. And I should be allowed to say that. It reflects badly on my upbringing and my own being. Or it may be a very well argued position that all religions are bad, that I might want to make. But if I were to say that these people who have these religious practices are terrible, now take your guns out and go out and kill them. Now that's a dangerous speech. That is incitement of violence, and there should be some laws restricting people from going out and killing innocent people merely because they dress differently, eat different food, worship different god, or don't worship a god, which should also apply to atheists.
No, that's standard United Nations Human Rights Charter, where it says that, yes, you can say anything against religions, but however, you cannot say things that could endanger individual religious person or a group of individual religious person, because if you incite hatred and violence against a group of people, and if somebody goes out and kills them, that's on you. I understand that. But
incitement of violence, there should be laws against it. I agree with that. I think there is a case to be made for that. We know what happened in Rwanda, for example, when the radio station was completely unrestrained, and we don't want to be in that kind of a situation. But if somebody is going to be very vigorously criticize a religion, he or she should have the right, just as Salman Rushdie had the right to write the novel.
Yeah, religion and religious people are two different things, right?
Yeah, and the other example is of Ambedkar in India, who wrote books which were critical of Ram and Krishna, Riddles of Ramayana and Riddle of Hinduism. And that book also should be freely available to people who want to read it. So
what throw me off about this Austrian thing is that...
Well, here,
I'm just going to quote a line from this then. It says, everyone has the right for their religious feelings to not get hurt. I thought this was something... I thought I misread it. It could be a Bangladeshi thing, but how come an Austrian judge says things like that? We criticize Bangladeshi mullahs continuously. So, Tasneem.
No, we need to realize. I mean, Salil mentioned the judgment, and unfortunately, most of the reports of this story, news reports I have read, are a little bit misleading, because I mean journalists who wrote it did not necessarily...
I'm showing an article right now on the screen that is actually a Deutsche Welle article, and this is not misleading. I mean, this is Deutsche Welle. You can see it. Prophet Muhammad, a pedophile, does not fall within freedom of speech, and that says European Court.
No, the European Court actually said this. The judgment is this, that there was an issue of freedom of speech being balanced against another right, which is, like people's right to be, like religious rights or the right of not getting offended. So I
thought the right was
I have read the judgment. The ECHR actually says this, that they are happy with how the Austrian court has argued the case. That is actually the heart of the judgment. They're not, please, I mean, I don't know whether Deutsche Welle or BBC or CNN has done something. I mean, anyone can go to the judgment and check what was at issue here. The European Court makes this observation, and this is not, this is not actually something we do not find in the European Human Rights Charter. I mean, all of the rights in the catalog are subject to some kind of restrictions. And you have to balance one right against another right. And how exactly the courts do that, that is the question here. And the European Court in this case has said that they're happy with the justifications provided by the Austrian court. So this is not, again, I mean, any viewer who is watching your show or anyone who is reading these reports, I mean, this is not a ban on, what shall I say?
Calling Muhammad pedophile.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to call Muhammad a pedophile, and if, wherever you are, the court actually says that your freedom of speech, I mean, the
documents clearly say that the Austrian court later convicted the woman of disparaging religion and fined her some money. What is disparaging religion? Is that not the same thing that hurting people's religious sentiment that we hear in Bangladesh, and we kind of argue against it in Bangladesh?
No, again, I mean, this was a case where the Austrian court actually went through steps and explained that, I mean, her right to criticize Muhammad, when that was balanced against other people's right of not being disparaged, not being insulted, not being hurt, not being hated, for example. I mean, when that test was taken, I mean, they had to say that, okay.
I don't understand, because is Muhammad's family got hurt by calling Muhammad? Because Muhammad is definitely not.
I'm going to talk about here. I mean, what I'm
he died like 1400 years ago. How?
Again, I'm saying that, I mean, the issue you brought here was that what is this judgment? What I'm saying that no one should take this judgment. By the way, I have seen this report in lots of Bangladeshi newspapers. Only one headline in Manav Jamin was correct. And that says, European court says the Austrian judgment is joktik or justified. That was what they were trying in that specific judgment. Now we can have debate about, whether it is a good idea to call Muhammad a pedophile, or, that's another discussion. But here I want to be, be absolutely clear that the European court has not given sort of a, ban on criticizing
Muhammad. Definitely not. But I'm just saying, the stuff that...
Can I add?
Sorry, go ahead.
Can I add? This is something, I mean, I'm moving a bit away from this discussion and back to Bangladesh and also maybe India. I
was just going to say that the stuff that we blame Bangladesh for, because the title of this particular discussion, I said, freedom of speech, because if we blame our own country for stuff, and then we see the same thing happen in Europe, then how can we actually blame Bangladesh? I'm being the devil's advocate here, by the way, so excuse me for that.
Let me give you an example from next door neighbor of Bangladesh, where this same thing, like Muhammad being a pedophile, this trope, let's say, is being used against Rohingyas in some of the Facebook infographics released by the Burmese army, for example. Muhammad, the warlord and all that, not for criticizing Muhammad, but for aiding and fueling a genocide against Rohingyas who happen to be Muslim. So definitely the question of balancing right to free speech or right to say whatever you want against right to protect, the freedom of people the right to life and right against other kind of repression, the right against genocide, for example. I mean, these things always need to be balanced. Like Salil brought out the example of Rwanda. I would say, I mean, what we saw recently in Burma, I mean, we had the hate radios in Rwanda, and we have hate Facebook in Burma, and there are stories. How do we'll always have to think about, you know, like balancing these rights. I am a strong proponent of freedom of expression, but international law does recognize that there are cases, there are times, there are events where these rights will have to be, you know, like restricted. Having said that, I'd now like to go back, because I saw a question by one of your viewers, is that, you know, like what the, you know, what is the plan of the Jukto Front or BNP if they can come to power? I cannot comment on that, but I have a proposal which I have already written briefly about. I think in Bangladesh we do need a strong law, strong piece of law, which would positively protect people's freedom of expression, which will positively protect freedom of the press. Like we have in the United States, we have the First Amendment part of it. I mean, it talks about, you know, freedom of the press. And then in Sweden, we have the two pieces of law, the Freedom of Press Act and the Fundamental Law on Freedom of Expression, which positively makes it a crime for government officials, for example, if they want to, you know, censor and surveil journalists. So we need something like that in Bangladesh going forward. As Salil mentioned, that, I mean, it does not matter who is in government. You know,
but I think what you're alluding to, sorry to interrupt there, what you're alluding to is actually to balance between freedom of speech and people's lives being endangered. It's not a balance between freedom of speech and the people who are getting hurt by that speech. I'm talking about really sentimentally hurt. We are talking about if somebody says something that could potentially create a hate crime and also some sort of a riot against a group of people, that needs to be curtailed, which is kind of universally accepted. But let's be clear that we are not talking about, for example, the atheists saying something against the religious people, and then the mullahs, who are the salesperson for religion, getting hurt by the atheist. We are not trying to balance that.
No, but here the context is different, because, you know, you have said something like, you have said that, you know, like, what if, I mean, we are criticizing Bangladesh, but then we are, how can we subscribe to whatever happened in Austria? See, here in Austria, anti-Muslim bigotry is a serious problem.
That goes into racism, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's anti-Muslim bigotry.
In Sweden, where I live, I mean, in Stockholm, there are recent examples of defacement of mosques. People, I mean, terrible hate crimes do take place against Muslims, and the government need to proactively go and try to protect these people's rights.
Absolutely.
Which is different than a Muslim majority country like Bangladesh. Here I would ask you and ask anyone to sort of, you know, like also look at the context closely. I mean, anti-Muslim bigotry theoretically is not such a big problem in Bangladesh because it's a Muslim majority country. There the problem is quite the opposite. There the problem is, if you are an atheist, then you are, you know, like you are treated as if you are some kind of a monster.
Salil, do you want to add something to this particular comment or point?
Not much. I mean, I get the thrust of the argument here. That what I would like to talk about is a slightly different argument I often have with people who talk about their hurt sentiments, and which is, you know, the classic thing that Salman Rushdie said when people were upset with satanic verses. If you don't like a book, don't read it. If you don't like a book, don't buy it. Argue with it. Write a better book and criticize the book. I mean, you know, there was this famous Hindu spiritual leader called Swami Vivekanand. He was Bengali. Narendranath was his birth name before he became a sannyasi. And there is a good story about him that he had gone traveling across India, and then he saw examples of Hindu temples which were destroyed by Muslim invaders, and he got extremely angry. And he was meditating with enormous anger and vengeance. And this is from his own writings. I'm not making up anything here. But the goddess emerged in front of him. He says that. And the goddess says that, why are you so angry? So he tells the goddess that, Devi, I'm very angry because I've seen all your temples have been destroyed by Mohammedans, is how the text writes about it. And at which the goddess asks him, are you there to protect me or am I there to protect you? And that made Vivekanand realize that it's pointless. I mean, the gods are not only in the stones. They are supposed to be everywhere. If they are indeed omnipotent, and if they are indeed as powerful as we think they are, or those who are believers who think they are, then they are very able to look after themselves. I mean, a book like Satanic Verses should not offend, somebody who is the target of that. Or a book like Riddles of Rama and Krishna should not upset Rama and Krishna, because they are supposed to be gods. And I think that's often forgotten here. And I think it's the herd sentiment that people have, and which probably shows, and this is pure conjecture here, that their faith in their own system is not as strong. Because if I believe that something is good, then if you were to tell me, no, Salil, that's stupid, you're wrong, because what you're saying is good is actually bad, I would say, fine, that's your opinion and I feel sorry for you. And I will continue to believe what I do. Now, I do happen to believe that Rahul Dravid, the Indian batsman, is a god, right, in cricket. And many people say, no, that's not true, Sachin Tendulkar is God. And I would say, fine, that's your belief, this is my belief. And let's leave it at that. I mean, neither Dravid nor Tendulkar is going to be a weaker batsman merely because I think one way and you think the other way. And I think we should try to think of it in those terms.
Now, I thought I should kind of say all those things, and I am playing a bit of a devil's advocate. I understand both of your contexts, because, but a lot of our viewers might have different ideas and also different arguments. So I thought I say a few of theirs.
But this is how I tend to respond at that time. Yeah.
Fantastic. No, thank you, gentlemen, for your kind participation and taking time. I know it's a Saturday evening, and this is kind of the prime time of the whole week for us lot who actually has to work and who, are not well enough to actually retire early. And I would like to retire early if possible.
Can I show the badge I've been wearing?
Yes, please. Yeah, go ahead.
This is wonderful. Shahidul
Alam. So that I can to the camera, and may he be free very soon. He's supposed to get the Lucy Award tomorrow in New York. Sadly, he cannot be there, but that's not because he doesn't want to be there, but he's forced not to be there, and we hope he's free very soon.
How can we get one of those badges? I mean, are these publicly available, as in, can we purchase them?
I think those are the campaign activities that we took part in at the Bangladesh mission in London, where they were distributed. I do hope there are badges and t-shirts, and yes, they should be more easily available. I agree.
Yes, definitely. And Tasneem, Khalil, you mentioned that there is something going on tomorrow in Bangladesh.
So tomorrow, Shahidul Alam's case is in the cause list of before the High Court bench. Hopefully, they will. I'm a very optimist kind of a person, and I'm hoping that they will grant him bail. There is no reason for him to not get bail. I mean, they have not charged him as in they have not given any charge sheet. The lower court was very unfortunately, I mean, we know that the courts are not free in Bangladesh, and the lower courts have performed very miserably, I have to say. But I'm hoping that tomorrow Shahidul Alam will be granted bail if the court actually hears his case. It is ridiculous. It is not only ridiculous, it is very cruel to hold a man in prison for 83 days without even, hearing him out properly.
So this is news to me. So he has not been charged?
No, I mean, he is right. I mean, they have not framed the charges. I mean, there is no charge sheet.
Actually hold somebody without charge by law in any democratic country?
Well, I mean, then we have to actually talk about democracy and what sort of democracy Bangladesh is. But there is no charge sheet against Shahidul Alam. The initial FIR or the Ejahar or the was there, where they simply put in a bogus, cooked up quotation, large paragraph.
Which is falsified, so this cannot be submitted as evidence.
Absolutely falsified. Even the Facebook URL they mention in the FIR is wrong. Then they did a police report before the court, where they actually again falsify different URLs.
It sounds to me, sorry to interrupt you there, it sounds to me that in Bangladesh, because as you mentioned, the courts are not actually independent and they are kind of controlled, and we have seen evidence of that. For example, Barrister Surendra Kumar Sinha, who tried to fight for the justice system, is been forced out of country. And I know it's slightly outside of the perimeter of this discussion, but that means anybody in the justice system are now afraid because similar things can happen to them. That means they are not really free to make the judgment as they should be. That means inside Bangladesh, you don't really need justifiable cause or anything like that. You can just cook something up and then the system will punish them.
Arif, there are videos where you will see that the law secretary of Bangladesh, Shahidul, he is carrying a gun, a revolver, and going in to an apartment to threaten a judge. The judge who was in charge of giving a verdict in a case which implicated Tariq Rahman. So this is the situation. This is the kind of intimidation the judiciary is facing right now. But then again, coming back to Shahidul Alam, he has not been formally, there is no formal charge sheet against him. And whatever charges, whatever police report, whatever FIR they filed are absolutely bogus. So this is the context which we need to understand, and then mention that he is sitting in a prison for 83 days. And then I would also like to mention, I mean, since we are talking about the judiciary, Maidul Islam, the university teacher, he was granted bail by the higher court, but they are still keeping him inside prison because the spelling of his name was not right in the bail bond.
So that is, for a lack of a better word, that is bullshit.
Yeah, well, your viewers are gonna use stronger words, I'm sure, but simply because this gentleman's name was misspelled in the bail bond, even after getting bail,
but that's a clerical thing. And how long does it take to actually fix that? I mean, if somebody,
last time I checked, this clerical error has taken at least 1 week, and he's still in prison, and his wife is trying her best.
Regardless of the outcome, regardless of the the ruling, if the government wants to put somebody in, keep somebody in, the government will do that. So,
yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what is happening. But I want to be an optimist again. I hope the government, especially Sheikh Hasina, she will come to her senses, and she will, the quality of a leader is not only doing the right things, but also realizing when she has done something wrong. I hope that she will realize, I hope that she will instruct her security agencies to stop interfering in the judiciary, and I hope the court tomorrow will hear Shahidul Alam's case and release him. And I hope that others who are in prison will be released very soon.
On that
I
note,
would like to say
sorry,
one.
yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, just one last thing I wanted to share. That, at Rayer Bazaar, which is the Martyrs Monument, there is this famous monument there itself. But there's also this poem by Asad Chowdhury, and which I always think of when I think about the strife in Bangladesh, and what's happening and what was the promise of independence and where we are now. And I think anybody who cares about Bangladesh and is in a power to change things and is in the government should reflect on these words of Asad Chowdhury, which are Tomader jar bolar chilo bolche kita Bangladesh.
Thank you. On that note, I will thank you both, and for attending. I am slightly overwhelmed, as you can see, and I don't know if this discussion that we had in English, because you will not find similar discussion anywhere about Bangladesh, because I think people are just afraid, seriously afraid, and I really welcome both of you for taking your time and also showing the courage of saying what you just said. And I hope tomorrow Shahidul Alam is freed, although I'm hoping for the best but waiting for the worst kind of mentality now. And I don't know how long does this rabbit hole go and what might be the future of Bangladesh. We have seen evidence of similar things happening in other seriously failed states such as Pakistan, such as other countries, but we really don't want Bangladesh to become one. Such a great legacy, such great culture, such great people, but it's just somehow it's just spiraling down into this mess. And we really hope that Bangladesh will turn back and start to progress. Thank you everybody who joined, people who commented. I can see there are lots of comments, and I really don't have the time right now to read through all of those, but the comments will remain in YouTube. And again, thank you both for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And again, before we say goodbye for the night, I would like to request you to share this video to your English-speaking friends and people who you think may be able to kind of exert some sort of influence on Bangladesh government, although I don't have high hopes of it. But please do share it because it was a good coverage of what happened surrounding Shahidul Alam and what the bigger context is. And hopefully together we can make a difference and bring Bangladesh back to its own feet. And as a Bangladeshi, expatriate Bangladeshi, I really hope we make a difference. Thank you again for being with us, and please subscribe so that later other videos similar to that you can see. And also please look around, browse around in this channel. Hopefully it will stay here, because there are lots of attacks, digital attacks take place in my Facebook profile. Currently, although I have a blue verification tick, but I'm still banned for 30 days. I don't know how that attack takes place, but similar attacks can happen continuously. On the streets, we get slaughtered. On our doorstep, police can arrive, and on digital platforms, we get attacked by mass reporting. But still, as long as we are here, we will try to speak for Bangladesh. Thank you again, and hope to see you again in another video. Wherever you are, please stay safe. Thank you.